All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to jump into the deep end.
Awesome. Well, today we're going straight to the heart of Indonesian politics.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It is. We're talking about President Prabowo Subianto.
Right, his first 100 days are up.
And the rumors are swirling
About.
a cabinet reshuffle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Prabowo's not known for, shying away from bold moves.
That's for sure.
And he basically just issued a warning
A warning to who?
to his ministers at a huge Nahdlatul Ulama event, basically saying anyone not performing is out.
The Nahdlatul Ulama.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big stage to make that kind of statement.
It is. The NU, as it's often called, is Indonesia's largest Islamic organization.
100 hari pertama, ya, saya sudah beri istilahnya peringatan berkali-kali. Sekarang, siapa yang bandel, siapa yang dablek, siapa yang tidak mau ikut dengan aliran besar ini, dengan tuntutan rakyat, pemerintah yang bersih, siapa yang tidak patuh, saya akan tidak. Dan saudara-saudara, jangan kira kami ini bodoh. Memang ada yang mengatakan saya ini tolol, ada. Nggak apa-apa. Ya. Ada yang mengatakan saya bajingan yang tolol, ya kan? Tapi saya nggak sebut namanya, kalian sudah tahu loh. Gitu. Nggak apa-apa. Tapi kami paham dan kami mengerti. Dari saudara-saudara, ya, 100 hari pertama kami akan baik. Dalam arti, saya berharap ada kesadaran. Saya pernah menyampaikan, seluruh aparat, seluruh institusi, bersihkan dirimu. Sebelum kau dibersihkan. Dan saya ingatkan semua aparat, kesetiaanmu adalah kepada bangsa negara dan rakyat Indonesia. Kalau kau tidak setia kepada rakyat Indonesia, kalau kau menghalangi kebijakan-kebijakan yang untuk membantu rakyat Indonesia, saya akan tindak, saudara-saudara sekalian. Dan saya minta menteri-menteri, pemimpin-pemimpin lembaga, tidak ragu-ragu. Saudara-saudara kita hanya bekerja untuk bangsa, negara, dan rakyat Indonesia. Bahasa Indonesia kan jelas kan?
Diartikan sendiri aja ya Pak.
Jadi begini, kita ingin rakyat menuntut pemerintah yang bersih, yang benar, yang bekerja dengan benar. Jadi saya ingin tegakkan itu, ya. Jadi kepentingan hanya untuk bangsa, rakyat, tidak ada kepentingan lain. Yang tidak mau bekerja benar-benar untuk rakyat, ya saya akan singkirkan.
So choosing their anniversary to basically threaten a cabinet shakeup.
Oh, yeah. It's a signal for sure. He means business.
And I bet he didn't hold back in his speech either.
Not at all. I mean, he even called some of them stupid.
Oh, wow.
Seriously, yeah. And not going with the flow. When a president uses that kind of language...
You know it's serious.
Exactly.
But it's interesting, right? It's not just him ranting. This ties back to his campaign promises, doesn't it?
It totally does.
I mean, the public wants to see a change. They want a clean and effective government.
That's a key point. So for anyone who needs a reminder, Prabowo's campaign, it was all about shaking things up, right? Big changes were promised, especially for everyday Indonesians.
Yeah, and this 100-day mark is kind of a traditional checkpoint. For new administrations, I mean.
I know, time to assess.
Exactly. See what's working, what's not. Some analysts, like Aditya Pradana, see it as a fair evaluation period.
Makes sense.
But some might say it's too early for such a drastic move.
True. But we've got the promises, the pressure's building, and now this public warning.
It really makes you wonder.
Right. Is a reshuffle actually coming?
And if it is, who's in trouble?
Yeah. Who's in Prabowo's crosshairs?
Well, if we're looking for potential targets, those caught up in public controversies come to mind.
Interesting.
I mean, think about the Pagar Laut situation.
Yeah. Right. That huge seawall project.
Yeah.
Caused a lot of uproar.
Exactly. And then there's the issue with LPG distribution.
Those essential 3-kilogram canisters.
Yeah. A lot of households depend on those.
And there were a lot of problems with that, right?
Major public outcry. And both of those issues are directly linked to specific ministries.
Right. But those controversies alone don't mean those ministers are definitely out.
Sure.
There's also that report from Celios, the Center of Economic and Law Studies.
Right. They actually named 5 ministers they think are going to be replaced.
They did. And their methodology is pretty interesting, right?
It is. They rely on expert judgment.
Meaning?
Basically, a panel of journalists.
Journalists.
Yeah, but journalists who are deeply familiar with the government. They evaluate each minister based on specific criteria.
Like what?
Program success. Are they doing what they're supposed to? Whether their policies actually meet public needs, leadership skills, how they manage their budget.
So it's not just random opinions.
Nope, they're getting insights from people who follow these ministries closely.
Okay, I'm hooked. Who are these 5 ministers Celios has flagged? What are their stories?
Well, one of the most interesting cases is Raja Juli Antoni.
And who is he?
The Minister of Forestry. Celios gave him a terrible score, basically said he was invisible.
Invisible? What did he wander off into the jungle and forget to come back?
Haha, not literally. But they're basically saying he hasn't done much, no real impact, no visible action.
Ouch. And considering Prabowo's focus on the environment and sustainable development?
Yeah, that lack of action could be a big problem.
So that's one down. Who else is on Celios' list?
Okay, next up is Budi Arie Setiadi.
Okay.
He's the Minister of Cooperatives.
Right.
Celios criticized his lack of innovation in managing cooperatives, which are really important, by the way.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, especially in rural areas. They're crucial for economic empowerment.
So we have an invisible Minister of Forestry and a Minister of Cooperatives who needs a creativity boost. That's a good way to put it.
Who else is there?
Well, Celios also called out the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Balil Lahadalia.
Okay.
They were critical of his approach to energy resources.
Specifically.
The transition to clean energy, actually. And then there's Yandri Susanto.
All right.
He's the Minister of Villages, Development of Disadvantaged Regions, and Transmigration.
That's a mouthful.
It is. He got a low score for some village policies that were pretty controversial. And there were also allegations of conflicts of interest.
Not good.
And the 5th minister.
All right. The 5th one is the Minister of Human Rights, Nathalius Pigai.
Okay.
He got a lot of backlash for some of his policies and public statements.
Wow, okay. That is quite a lineup.
Okay.
But we can't forget about Prabowo's own coalition government, the Koalisi Indonesia Maju. There's always a political game happening behind the scenes, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, those power dynamics could definitely affect who stays and who goes.
Oh, for sure. And we've even got some whispers from within Gerindra, Prabowo's party.
Really? Like what?
Well, Ahmad Muzani, the Secretary General, he said publicly that the party will support any decision Prabowo makes. Regarding a cabinet reshuffle, I mean.
Smart move. Don't want to get on the bad side of the box.
Exactly. And then you have Sufmi Dasko Ahmad, who's the Deputy Speaker of the House and also a senior Gerindra member. He's hinted that some ministers aren't exactly in sync with the rest of the cabinet.
Oh, so creating some friction.
You could say that.
Wow. So we have public criticism, a pretty harsh Celios report, and now whispers from within Prabowo's own party.
It's heating up.
But is this all speculation? Or are there any concrete signs that a reshuffle is actually happening?
Well, there's also what's coming from other parties in the coalition, like the National Awakening Party or PKB. Jazeel Fawad, their deputy chairman, has suggested that Prabowo probably already has a list of replacements.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he thinks it's just a matter of time before it all goes down.
So it's not just who's going out, it's who's coming in.
Exactly. This is getting really interesting.
It is.
This reshuffle, it's not just about getting rid of people who aren't performing well. It's about making sure the cabinet can actually do what Prabowo wants it to do. You know, his vision for Indonesia.
Okay, so we've talked about the context of Prabowo's ultimatum. We've looked at potential targets based on public controversies and that Celios report. And we've even touched on those whispers from within the coalition. But you know what? I'm feeling a little mischievous.
Oh.
What about some wild card speculation? Any ministers we think might be vulnerable even if they haven't been publicly called out?
You want to play the game of political intrigue?
A little bit.
It is hard to resist, I'll give you that.
Right.
Remember, in the end, this is all about Prabowo's priorities for Indonesia. So anyone not effectively helping him achieve those, even if they're not involved in some scandal, could be at risk.
That's a good point. So it's not just about avoiding mistakes, it's about actively contributing to his agenda.
Right. And don't forget about the loyalty factor. How safe are those ministers who aren't part of Prabowo's inner circle, especially with his strong leadership style? He might want to consolidate his power by having people he trusts around him.
This is starting to feel like a really high-stakes chess game. We've got public perception, performance, and loyalty all in the mix.
And remember, Prabowo has all the power here. He decides who stays and who goes. This could be a huge moment in his presidency. It really could. It's not just about individual careers or political maneuvering. This potential reshuffle could have a ripple effect on the entire government and across Indonesia's political landscape. The stakes are high, the implications are far-reaching, but before we jump ahead, let's take a closer look at what's actually driving Prabowo's decisions here.
I'm all ears. Let's do that after a quick break. So we were talking about those high stakes before the break, and you hinted at some deeper motivations behind this potential reshuffle. What's really driving Prabowo's decisions here?
Well, we need to remember the campaign trail.
Okay, going back a bit.
Remember those big, bold promises Prabowo made? Strong leadership, economic growth, a better life for everyday Indonesians. Those were his big things.
Right, he really wanted to shake things up.
Exactly. And he laid out some pretty concrete goals too, didn't he? Not just vague ideas, but actual targets for things like reducing poverty and improving infrastructure.
Oh, he was ambitious.
He talked about speeding up those infrastructure projects, especially in rural areas. And he set some pretty challenging targets for lowering poverty and unemployment. It wasn't just talk, it was a clear vision for where he wanted to take Indonesia.
So this cabinet shakeup, it's not just about punishing people who messed up. It's about getting a team together that can actually make those promises happen. It's about having the right people in the right spots to actually move things forward.
You got it. Prabowo needs ministers who are not only competent, but completely on board with his vision. People capable of actually executing his plans. And that brings us back to those ministries Celios flagged. If you look closely, you can see how those potential replacements actually connect to Prabowo's core promises and the problems he's facing.
Okay, so how do those specific ministries tie into the bigger picture of Prabowo's goals?
Let's take the Ministry of Forestry, for example. Indonesia's natural resources are a big deal for the economy, right? And Prabowo really pushed sustainable development and environmental protection. But an invisible minister of forestry, like Celios said, doesn't exactly instill confidence in those areas, does it?
True. If Prabowo wants to actually show he's serious about sustainability, he needs a strong leader in that position, someone who's both visible and effective.
Yeah.
What about those other ministries Celios mentioned? How do they fit in?
Well, think about the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. That's key for economic growth, right? And Prabowo has been pretty vocal about wanting to increase Indonesia's own energy production and lessen reliance on imports. So if the current minister isn't delivering on that, well, his job might be in jeopardy, especially with all the public frustration over things like LPG distribution.
It's all starting to connect. Prabowo isn't just reacting to controversy. He's trying to position his cabinet to achieve his long-term goals. What about the Ministry of Villages, development of disadvantaged regions, and transmigration? That one's a bit harder to see the connection.
Not really. It's directly related to Prabowo's promise to reduce poverty and inequality. That ministry is in charge of improving the lives of people in rural communities, which was a big part of his platform. So those allegations of conflicts of interest and those controversial policies, they're big red flags if Prabowo really wants to help those communities.
Right. It all goes back to those campaign promises. This reshuffle, if it happens, is a test of whether he's actually going to do what he said he would.
Exactly. And it's not just about each minister doing their job well separately. It's about the entire cabinet working together as a team, moving towards the same goals.
But we have to think about the political side of things too, right? Prabowo's leading a coalition government, so he has to balance the interests of several different parties, each with their own goals. How does that affect his decisions?
That's a great point. Prabowo can't just pick the best person for the job. He has to maintain some kind of political stability within the coalition. He needs to consider which parties control which ministries, how a reshuffle might shift the balance of power, whether certain changes could cause problems. He has to weigh all those things carefully.
Sounds like a tough balancing act. He's got to keep his promises to the people while also navigating the complexities of this coalition. One wrong move could cause chaos.
That's the reality of politics. It's a delicate dance. And that's what makes this situation so interesting to watch. This potential reshuffle isn't just about changing who's in charge of what. It's a high-stakes political game.
Okay, we've talked about the promises, the pressure, the potential targets. But I keep thinking about that quote from Prabowo's speech, where he basically calls some of his cabinet members stupid and stubborn. It seems so blunt. What was the full context of that statement?
Well, he said it during his speech at the Nahdlatul Ulama anniversary. That's a pretty big event in Indonesian politics. He was talking about how important unity is to achieving national goals, but he also didn't shy away from criticizing those who were resisting his vision. He even directly linked his frustration to the fact that the public is demanding a clean government.
So it wasn't just him venting. He was making a calculated move, presenting himself as the champion of the people against corruption and inefficiency. What exactly did he say? I'm curious about his wording.
He was quite direct. He said, and I quote, "I've given warnings many times. Now, whoever is stubborn, whoever is stupid, whoever doesn't want to go with the flow of this great current, with the people's demands for a clean government, I will take action."
Wow, there's no mistaking what he meant. He's not asking for cooperation. He's demanding it. And he's framing this potential reshuffle as a necessary step to get rid of those who are holding things back.
Exactly. He's drawing a line, and this reshuffle, if it happens, is his way of enforcing it. It's about showing his authority, silencing those who disagree with him, and getting people to support his agenda.
So it's not just about replacing a few ministers. It's about sending a message to the entire government and to the people that he's serious about his promises, about holding people accountable, about taking action.
That's a good way to put it. It's about consolidating power and setting the tone for his presidency.
This could be a defining moment for him. If he follows through, it'll have a huge impact on Indonesia's political landscape. And those ministers Celios mentioned, they're right in the middle of it all.
They are. But let's not forget the bigger picture. This isn't just about individuals' careers or political maneuvering. It's about what direction Indonesia will take, the kind of leadership it needs now.
Okay. Paint us a picture. Why should our listeners care about this?
Well, Indonesia's facing some big challenges, right? Economic inequality, climate change, political divisions, social unrest. Prabowo came to power with a lot of hope behind him. He promised bold solutions, a new era of progress and prosperity.
But to actually do those things, he needs the right team. A cabinet that's not just competent, but also aligned with his vision, able to tackle those challenges.
You nailed it. And that's why this potential reshuffle is so important. It's a test of Prabowo's judgment, his strategy, his ability to build a team that can lead Indonesia through these uncertain times.
This is serious stuff. But it matters. It's not just some political drama happening in Jakarta. It affects millions of Indonesians, their hopes, their livelihoods, their futures. It's all tied to the decisions Prabowo makes.
You're right. This reshuffle could determine whether Prabowo's big promises actually become reality or if they just fade away. And that's why we're here, analyzing this, helping our listeners understand what's at stake.
And I feel like this is only the beginning. We'll have to see what happens in the next few weeks, whether Prabowo actually goes through with this and what happens next. But before we get too far ahead, let's consider how the public is reacting to all of this. So we've been talking a lot about the politics behind this whole reshuffle thing.
The strategy, the players, all that.
But what about the people?
You mean everyday Indonesians?
Yeah, how are they reacting to all of this?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. You know, there's a lot of anticipation, like things are about to change, you know.
Right, like the ground shifting under Indonesian politics.
Exactly. But when it comes to those ministers, Celios named, public opinion is pretty divided.
Really? You'd think with the controversies and the Celios criticism, everyone would be on the same page.
It's not that simple. Let's look at the Minister of Energy for a second. Some people are really critical of his LPG policies.
Right, saying it hurts the poor.
Yeah, that they disproportionately affect low-income households.
Makes sense.
But then you have others who support him, you know?
Because
they back his efforts to boost domestic energy production. They see the bigger picture.
So it's not a black and white, good minister, bad minister situation.
It's much more nuanced than that.
Depends on who you ask and what they care about.
Exactly. Public opinion is never a single voice. It's always a mix of different perspectives. Political affiliations, economic backgrounds, regional views, it's all part of it.
So those ministers who are facing all this criticism, they probably still have people backing them.
Definitely.
And Prabowo can't just ignore that, can he?
Nope, he has to take it all into account, balance those different viewpoints, and ultimately make the call about what's best for the entire country. It's a lot of pressure.
It is, but that's what makes these decisions so important. It's not just about political maneuvering, it's about how these decisions actually affect people's lives.
Absolutely. He needs to keep the Indonesian people at the forefront of his mind. Their concerns, their hopes, all of that should be guiding him as he navigates this tricky situation.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about the political strategy, we've looked at the public's reaction, those campaign promises are still looming, and it all points to this reshuffle potentially being a huge turning point for Prabowo. But let's have a little fun, shall we? Let's put on our prediction hats. If this shakeup does happen, who do you think wins? Who loses?
That's the question everyone's asking in Jakarta. It's hard to say for sure, but we can definitely make some educated guesses.
Right, let's play. Who stands to lose the most in this whole thing?
The most obvious ones are those ministers who have been criticized publicly or, got those negative reviews from Celios. They're definitely vulnerable. Like the Minister of Forestry, the invisible one, he might have a tough time keeping his job.
Right, and the Minister of Energy. With all that controversy swirling around him, he could be in trouble too.
Especially if Prabowo wants to show that he's taking those public concerns seriously, that he's going to deliver on those promises he made.
So those two seem like the most likely to be replaced. But it's not just about who's been criticized, right? It's also about how much they agree with Prabowo's vision.
Yeah.
And importantly, their loyalty to him.
You got it. Prabowo might decide to swap some ministers out for people who are closer to him, those he can trust to carry out his plans without any pushback.
So even some ministers who haven't made any big mistakes, they could still be at risk if they're seen as not being fully on board with Prabowo's ideas or if they haven't shown enough loyalty.
It's possible. And then there's the whole coalition thing to think about. Prabowo has to keep those other parties happy, so we might see some replacements just to keep that balance of power,
Interesting. So some ministers might lose their jobs not because they've done something wrong, but just to keep things smooth within the coalition.
It's all part of the game. It's about making strategic moves, negotiating, and making sure the whole political system stays stable while you're still trying to get your agenda passed.
Okay, enough about the losers. Who are the potential winners in all this?
Well, the ones who get appointed to those open positions, of course. They have a chance to really make a difference and move their careers forward. It's a high-pressure situation, but there are some big rewards if you play it right.
And it's not just about individuals, right? There are political parties that could gain something too.
Right. If Prabowo appoints more people from certain parties, that gives those parties more power within the coalition, more influence on government policy, and potentially more advantages down the road.
So it's like a ripple effect. It's not just about who wins and who loses individually. It's about how this reshuffle shifts the balance of power for everyone.
Exactly. And those changes can have a big impact on Indonesia's political landscape.
And of course, we can't forget about the biggest potential winner of all, Prabowo himself.
Yes. If he plays his cards right, he could come out of this even stronger. It's a chance to show that he's a decisive leader, that he's committed to his promises, and that he can handle those complicated coalition dynamics.
So a successful reshuffle could boost his popularity, give him more control over the government, and really allow him to push his vision for Indonesia.
You got it. It's a risky move, but it could pay off big time.
We've covered a lot today, haven't we? From those first hints of a reshuffle to breaking down the potential winners and losers and what this could mean for Indonesia's future. This deep dive has really given us a glimpse into the inner workings of Indonesian politics.
It has, and it shows how important it is to stay informed, understand what's happening, and realize that these political decisions have a real impact on our lives.
Couldn't agree more. So, to everyone listening, keep following this story. Pay attention to what's happening, talk about it with others, and think about how this might affect you and your communities.
Because in the end, the future of Indonesia is shaped not only by those in power, but by everyone who's involved and engaged.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and interesting. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. That's all for today.